Why are we insisting on the word happiness? Because we're thinking long-term here. We're thinking about a revolution in the way people think about the good life. A revolution in terms of the way people think and pursue life's ultimate currency, happiness. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's so good to be here with you today, and we have a very exciting hour ahead of us. We're going to speak with Dr. Tayyab Rashid, a dear friend, and I would argue the world's leading expert on PPT. And PPT, no, is not PowerPoint. It's positive psychotherapy. And so Dr. Tayyab Rashid is a faculty member at Wellbeing Center for Wellbeing Science at Melbourne. He's also faculty associate with the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard, as well as the VIA Institute on Character. He has co-written with Professor Martin Seligman the seminal text on positive psychotherapy, and he has won numerous awards. Tayyab, I'm so glad to be here with you today and to learn from you, and for all of us to learn from you.
Thank you, Tal. I think it's a co-creation. We'll all learn from each other. I may speak a little bit in the beginning, but then from question answers, it will be a process of co-learning.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I have so many questions. I have about, let's see, 77 questions. So I hope you're ready to go. Now, so what we're going to do, I'm going to ask you questions for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for our audience. And the way for you to ask questions is just go below to, I forget what it's called, where you can put your hand up, reactions, and then you can just put your hand up and we'll call on you and you'll join us, and you'll get your answers, I hope. So, I think a lot, obviously, about how the field of positive psychology can be introduced into psychotherapy. Many of our students in the Happiness Studies Academy are psychotherapists or coaches, and obviously they are constantly thinking about application. So let's start with a very general question. What are some of the tools that you have found most useful in your therapy practice, in others' practices from the field of positive psychology that actually make a difference?
So let me start with the most important thing. There's a bit of a disclaimer, briefly. Tal, if I was going to invent this treatment approach now in 2023, I would not call it positive psychotherapy. Because when the positive psychology was in its infancy, blooming, everything that was coming from the research or practice was we love to attach the word positive to it. From positive parenting to positive education to positive medicine, positive health. I don't have a problem, but with positive psychotherapy especially, later on I realized that it gives you, the listeners, or even people who want to explore it, that the rest of psychotherapy, rest of mental health is negative. No, it's not. So I would rename this approach as balanced psychotherapy, as more holistic psychotherapy, but Tal, it'd be far less appealing, far less sexy. And I can't put the GD back in the bottle right now. So what basically it does is, before I come to what are the things that work, I have found meaningfully from the field of positive psychology in my clinical practice, is that positive psychotherapy is inherently about balancing. So I'm going to take a little bit back to and bring the field of psychotherapy or field of mental health. And field of mental health is it's about not looking at the deficits. Positive psychology in 2000 said we have missed the whole chunk, the big pie of our therapeutic cachet by not looking at the intact sides. So I think that was true because psychology before that was looking at deficits. So what I do is in my attempt is to balance both. So how do I balance it? I'm going to give you, we don't have time for going clinical examples of vignettes, but I will give you an example that if someone is has been treated unfairly, of course I listen to that thought, but I also try to bring, whenever possible, their attention to the acts of kindness which they have received. There's no one in our audience who have not received or at least experienced insults, criticism. But when I do that in psychotherapy, I try to balance it with compliments, genuine compliments, genuine praises. We all get that. Let me ask my audience, anyone in our audience who has not been forgiven and who have not transgressed. We all transgress, we all offend each other in our families, in the communities, etc. So it is about, yes, attending to those offenses, but also looking at the things which, how people helped us. It is, let me get to the more crux of the mental health issue. It is attending to the pain of trauma, but also exploring potential parts of growth. Because research shows from the post-traumatic growth literature that nearly 7 out of 10 people will grow one way or the other from trauma. Not everyone, and doesn't mean that all those who will grow doesn't experience stress, but they do. Let me do the one last point. We all have bitter memories. Those memories become more accentuated, amplified because of negativity bias when we are experiencing them and when we recall them. As a therapist, as a positive psychotherapist, my job is, yes, again, attending them, but also, whenever possible, sort of complementing them with the positive memories. And I'll give you a very quick example. I was working with a young man because it's the holidays time.
You should be unmuted.
And this young man had a very bitter relationship with the father. Father was most of the time was absent from their life, and they did not want to hear. So again, I attended to all the challenges and everything happened. So somehow, I don't remember how it did happen. Our conversation went, can you recall anything positive about your father? And because it's holidays time, he said it was somewhere in New York area, near Tri-State area, that the father, I remember, despite being absent, my father would come during holidays, during Christmas time, and would take me to a mall. And I cannot forget the sight of sitting on a carousel and my father standing next to me and clapping. Did that take away all the responsibilities which father did not fulfill? No. But again, it is creating some room. So Tal, what I do in positive psychology, by positive psychotherapy, is I want to become witness holistic witness of our clients' experiences, of both their yin and yang, positive and negative, and then help them put together to make to use their resources. So that's an important point, to use their intact resources in a mindful way. And for that, I take, I know, Tal, you like Aristotle's work. I am also enamored by Aristotle's work, and I take the framework of practical wisdom. So most of our audience will be familiar with strengths, 24 strengths and many other models of strengths. But in PPT, coming back to your question, how I use the notions from positive psychology, in PPT, for me, just giving knowledge of strengths is not important. It is about three things that I want my clients to know. One is how to translate abstract notions of kindness, spirituality, self-regulation, creativity into concrete, discernible, relevant, replicable actions. So that's one thing. Secondly, using those actions to undo their problems. And third is also being mindful. Tal, we are nearly 8 billion people in the world. And there's a sort of a mantra in the popular literature, especially in the organizational, we want leadership, leadership, leadership. We also need to be mindful how we teach our students, clients, strengths, which bring their happiness, but also doesn't impact others' happiness. Because we live in a very complex world. So I want them to have reflective understanding their actions would have on others. So one is translating into actions. Second is how relevant they are to problem solving. And third one is reflection in terms of impact on others.
You know, there was so many things come to mind as you're talking. One of them is, speaking of leadership, one of my mentors passed away a few years ago was Warren Bennis. And Warren Bennis has written many books on leadership. He's considered by many the founder of modern leadership studies. And one of his favorite phrases, which he got from one of his interviews, was the importance of being of use, to be of use. And when you feel that you're of use, it's in and of itself, you know, that puts you at a whole different plane and psychological state, to be of use. The other thing that I'm thinking of, and you know, many of the people attending here are students of the Happiness Studies Academy, either the certificate program or our master's program. And, you know, they will testify that somewhere, you know, in the beginning of our introductory course, I talk about the following. I say that over the past few years, many have asked me for the secret to happiness. And my response is, you know, because, you know, the book, The Secret, which has sold tens of millions of copies around the world, they ask me, so what's your secret to happiness? And my response to that type is that there's no secret to happiness. There are 3 secrets to happiness. And here are the 3 secrets. The first one is reality. The second secret is reality. And I'm assuming you can guess what the third secret is, reality. And this is what you were talking about, because in the therapeutic session, if you only are talking about the weaknesses, the abuses, the hardships, the difficulties, the challenges, the depression, the anxiety, it's certainly part of reality. It's real. At the same time, it's only part of it. Because there are also, even in the most difficult relationship, we can find acts of kindness. Even when I'm feeling down, I can still identify some strengths. Even when I have failed, I can find the silver lining. So it's always possible to also, not only also find the positive. And it sounds like this is what you're doing as part of your intervention.
Yes, I am doing, but because my field, Tal, is slightly different from, because I'm as a licensed clinical psychologist, I'm also responsible to hear the pain, to hold the pain in that co-created space.
Yes.
So I will find ways most of the time, and again, this is a very spontaneous process, to insert, to elicit, to explore positives. But I would not push my clients to express gratitude if they are gripped by grief. I would not encourage them to forgive when they have experienced colossal abuse. I would not inculcate hope and optimism, and downplay the important role of negative emotions that can be very helpful in to save themselves. I would also not, uh, as I said, I will not instill individualistic or autonomous sense of self when it will trample on rights of others, on the harmony of the family unit or the unit they live. So, so I think it's a balance that I try to do. But one thing, Tal, I am very careful, and I want our audience to. I I I have a sort of a little bit of a strong reaction to give them these kind of things. It's not your fault. All we need to do is to talk. All you need to is to listen. All you need is to open yourself, let go of all negativity. I think these kind of empty platitude, Thal has given to these, what is this recently very popular phrase, toxic positivity. And that's what oftentimes you and I are accused that, are we, by Academy of Happiness and Positive Psychotherapy, are we spreading toxic positivity? No. I think our audience, hopefully they can realize that we have gone through the academic process, and we don't want to oversimplify the complexity, but also not overly complicate it, as in some cases psychoanalysis was doing in old days, that it was too cumbersome. If you need to get a psychoanalytical treatment, you need to go for psychoanalysis for years.
Yes, I think this is such an important point, and this is also one of the issues with the name positive, because it's everything else negative. So I think your idea of finding a balance, and certainly providing as much space as is needed to experience the full range of human emotions. I talk about the permission to be human in that context, and part of being human is also being sad and angry and afraid and anxious, and the list goes on. So, Tayyab, many of the people here on the call are therapists or coaches, but not all. And my question is, does positive psychotherapy also have important lessons for the non-therapist? And let me give you a bit of a context of where this question comes from. So I think it was around 1935 when Karen Horney published, who was a student of Freud, published the book Self-Analysis. And in it, she said, yeah, if you can, ideally, go and see a therapist, a professional. Fast forward to the 21st century, Lord Richard Layard, from whom you know well, from the UK, said, in a perfect world, every one of us would have a therapist, her or his own therapist. And I would add to that, who's well-versed in positive psychotherapy. But that's an ideal world. We don't all have that. The question is, are there lessons just like, 1935, Karen Horney wrote about, are there lessons that you have extracted that I can apply without having to go to a therapist, just, to deal with my sadness or unhappiness or whatever the issue may be?
Yes. So, Tal, there are two parts to this question, I think. First part is the process. So the therapeutic process I try to engender, to cultivate in my interaction with clients, is very well informed actually by behavioral change, which, yes, it is comes from therapy, but also journaling. So because having been trained with Marty Seligman, I'm a strict behaviorist. So a couple of things I will share with our audience, which which I have found very helpful. So, for example, goal setting. And all your books talk about goal setting. So set some goals, but set behavioral goals, actionable goals. I also, from a therapeutic point of view, I sort of envision with my clients that what would happen if you achieve this goal, or what wouldn't happen if you didn't achieve this goal. And I give them a very concrete markers, 3 months. If you didn't do this, this desired goal in 3 months, what would happen? In 6 months, what would happen? 9. So it kind of builds them their visualizations, kind of going to Bandura's self-efficacy. What will be the social benefits? We live in a complex social world. And whom you can call for. So because the biggest epidemic, as our Surgeon General has said, North America is facing, is loneliness. So we also need to find ways to help our clients, either in therapy or in coaching, to connect with others. And Tal, I think I learned either lesson from you or from your book or some your talk. I use the reciprocal behavior. If you help me achieving this goal, let me also help you achieving what goal you want to achieve. So it's a reciprocal social psychology. Planned, detailed sort of analysis I do with barriers. Behavior change is not easy, folks. So ask them to brainstorm, and you write and you share, and lots of things we can do. But also give them concrete examples. What were model look, real life applicable examples. So there is never a positive psychotherapy group or even individual or training I have done without in half an hour going into movies. I use movies, clips, TED Talks a lot because these are real life illustrations. So use examples, use models, identify barriers, I said, set graded tasks. Look, it's our clients who come either in coaching or in therapy. They only tell you just of their challenges. They live in a complex world, so it's not possible for them to make big changes. So set graded changes. Last but not least would be self-monitoring. And that how would you monitor yourself? What will be sort of the steps for you to monitor yourself? And in doing so, always plan for failures. Almost all of us made a plan, didn't go well, we did get derailed. So you need to plan. In addiction literature, we call it relapse. So you need to plan for relapse. You need to plan. So how are you going to cope with that? So these are kind of these are very well done behavioral change studies in weight loss, in exercise. So that help. I'm going to give you, Tal, some of the examples from my COVID experience. Most of my COVID 2 to 3 years almost, I was doing therapy. This is my basement office in Toronto. And some of the most fulfilling work I did during COVID. So we'll give you a couple of examples, which more specific example. For example, if I would say my clients express gratitude, they say I want to express gratitude, but I don't know how. So we discussed, and then we developed some of these the feelers or conversation starters. How about you will say, it was so thoughtful of you to the other person, and help them to start the conversation, to modulate. I remember one client, a young person, moved back with their parents, and they realized how much their parents have contributed to their education and everything. So I said, how about you start the conversation? We came up, it's not me, we came up with the dialogue that how I would not have been able to accomplish this. Very simple. But then look, this is a simple which will go much deeper. In terms of empathy, I was working with a parent, and they said, I try my best to say things in different ways, but it doesn't just sink into my teenage children. I have 2 teenage boys. I believe that it's difficult. But I asked them, ask yourself, am I saying or doing things in a way that is making sense to my teenager, or to my partner, or to my friend? So ask yourself. So it's a self-reflective process. And the second step of that you can do is that if I were in their shoes, would I like to be talked at them like this? So because the change need to start from you. Yeah. The third application that comes to my mind is about forgiveness. Because we live in very complex, as I said, interpersonal world. And oftentimes our small transgressions build up, and we develop these grudges, and we isolate ourselves. So how about this was between 2 partners, and I said about we discussed long sessions. So to cut the story short, we came up with a sort of a starting line that I don't blame for you being upset. Because then you're opening with a very, very affirmative thing. Or in many cases, we were able to find, when we discuss with my clients, I acknowledge my part. As I said previously, anyone who has not offended, we all offend, and we have been forgiven. But starting with an I acknowledge my part. And now sometimes we realize after a while, because initially we are very upset when transgression happens. So even if you can't go back, if you think, there's so much has happened, even it's better to, even the person has left and there's no chance, if possible, say, and now I realize how you must have felt. And I want to tell you how I have felt. So I think these are all ways for us to these are all interpersonal. The first one where I was talking gratitude, interpersonal, forgiveness, interpersonal. One last thing that I think I have also during COVID is helping our clients in coaching, especially understand, accepting. For me, happiness or joy, therapeutic joy, is also helping them accept the parts of their selves which they can't change. Their parts, look, if you look at personality psychology, there are parts which are inherent traits, and there's little leverage. Your malleability of these traits is not huge. So we need to accept some problematic parts. Of course, change can always happen. By the same token, accept others can't change. There's a wonderful podcast from CBC, which is Canadian Broadcasting System. And if you can find it, it says, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. How many times, folks, that happens? Rarely. So sometimes we just have to accept our our shortcomings and others. Can we also liberate ourselves from worries and anxieties, small worries and anxieties, which keep on surfacing day after day, but we don't sort of shake them. So look at the worries which my colleague Karen Rivett says, the problems that don't get solved. So these are the worries that don't get solved, they still bother you. Can you sort of either liberate or kind of quote unquote let go of them? So there's a lots of the last one again. Nearly half of my clients have set up these unrealistic goals. I want to become an MBA player. I want to become an actor. And we keep on chasing those goals when those might not be able to accomplish those in that way. So maybe you can modify those goals. So I think the therapeutic joy for me, Tal, also comes by letting go of these sort of frigid moments, frigid perceptions that we hold about ourselves.
Interesting. So you started with goals. You talked about saying you're a behaviorist, or behavioral change, and you ended with goals to say sometimes we need to modify them. So again, they are realistic as opposed to, I'm going to be an NBA player. You talked about examples and models and, whether it's through movies or, there's a lot of work on bibliotherapy or real therapy, REEL therapy.
Yeah.
So examples and role models, biographies. You talked about self-awareness. This is something that explicitly was talked about by Karen Horney in self-analysis. She talked about the importance of journaling, forgiveness, empathy, so many overlaps from the therapeutic relationship to life.
So let me quickly add, just remind, because your question was very interesting. Tal, we give too much emphasis in therapy and coaching to talk therapy. Let me put down 4 or 5 things which are very important, which you can be sort of a vehicle modulator, not directly dispense that intervention. One is nature. Nature. So we are now finding nature-embedded interventions. When you are in nature, it actually restores your attention. You don't feel, most people don't come back from nature and say, I've felt very lonely. You feel connected. There's a cosmic connection that you feel. And so nature, you then combined with exercise. New York Times had a very provocative headline a couple of years ago that sitting is the new smoking. So I can go meta-analysis after meta-analysis that people who are not moving actively, their exercise have moderate to mild to moderate therapeutic effect on depression and many others. So nature, exercise. Third is social relationships. So social relationship, especially in giving and helping others, altruism. And the fourth one is spirituality. Whatever the tradition you come from, it's not directly attended in coaching and in therapy, but we find that it gives you some sort of a leverage of controllability. When you have a higher belief in higher power, then you resort that control to that higher power. It also, if you go to temple, to church, to mosque, the congregation give you social support. Of course, there's a double-edged sword too, that sometimes it can go on in a different path, and we have seen different faith editions. People becoming a little bit despondent. So the last but not least, which we have underexplored, Tal, is the power of art. I mean, I talked about art, films. But if we can incorporate more and more art in our therapeutic endeavors, all those who are coaches or in mental health professions, bring the tangible activities that can be very helpful.
I love that. Again, nature, spend more time in nature, exercise, sitting is the new smoking, relationships, being kind, being generous, spirituality, bring it in some way into your life, and finally more art.
More
Wonderful.
art. And again, don't have time, but I can go on about diet as well. Yes, and mindfulness, which kind of has now getting incorporated in our practices.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I have 72 questions left only, but I will open it up for to our audience. If you do have questions, please put your hand up through reactions and we will call on you. And in the meantime, as you put your hands up, I will ask one final question. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this, because this is a question that I've been hearing so much over the past year. And I think you'll have deeper insights than I do. So people ask me about AI, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT. Just yesterday, I had a lecture online, a webinar, and at the end of it, this is one of the questions that I got, which is, what role does AI play? Can AI play in facilitating mental health? And what the questioner said to me was, because I've been using it, I've been asking ChatGPT questions, and she has been giving amazing responses, and she's actually helping me. So where do you think this is all going? And I will just preface this by saying, so I was introduced to ChatGPT the first time by one of my colleagues, Udi, who's also running this session. And the first time I tried it, I said to ChatGPT, I'd like you to create a conversation between Aristotle and Lao Tzu on the nature of happiness. And Tayyab, my jaw dropped when I read that conversation, because I've read Aristotle, I don't know how many times, the Nicomachean Ethics in particular. I've read Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, I can't tell you how many times. I was reading them in a conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
Help. Tell me.
I'll take you to mid-50s. One of the wonderful articles which my supervisor, my colleague now, Dr. Bob McGrath, had me read to our entire class during my PhD was statistical versus clinical predictions. So when you have these actuarial large data models and feed them and ask them to predict a diagnosis, the statistical model almost always trump the clinical decisions. So that actually gave me confidence that yes, there is a role of science. So now fast forward those statistical model now coming into large machine models, into ChatGPT and chatbots. Yet there is, so I still think we are incredibly lucky that we can do this webinar, and it feels quite real. It's because we are using this technology, we can see each other. So there's certain advantages which we cannot underestimate of connecting online. If we couldn't connect online, how would we survive the pandemic? So I would say that let's use ChatGPT and large machine models as to supplement, not to substitute.
That's good. Supplement, not substitute.
Not to substitute. Computer cannot give you a hug.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? It can give you, you are absolutely right. The conversation that between Aristotle and Laozi was wonderful because without any error, it was able to pick up the large text and summarize it quickly. And that can help a lot of people for, let's say, understand what is a good treatment for cognitive distortions. And you can, what are the cognitive distortions? Do I have a cognitive? So you can interact with the machine model to understand that, but also know that the research for meta-analysis that I am well aware of, virtual mental health support, they work best in hybrid models. So if you start with the in-person interaction, and then translate into online, that's wonderful. Somewhere, or it doesn't matter at what point, somewhere along the line, we need to feel the tangibility. Let me go back. I think at the beginning I said that I want to be the witness, wholesome witness of my client's wholesomeness. And I can't do that. Our machine infrastructure is not advanced enough. It's not 3D or fourth dimensional that it can incorporate all the nuances. But if you start, because Tal, we met, I think, we know each other for a very long time. I would think it was year 2000 or around that.
Yeah.
When we recently met, it looked like, okay, we picked up from where we left. So, because we knew each other. But if we had met only virtually and then met, and not met in real life, that would be very different. At the same time, so that's the ideal. But my worry, Tal, is that the escalation in mental health issues is so huge that if we don't deploy these models to increase the access, we may not be able to help lots of people who need help. And here's one of my troubling lesson that I've learned from clinical field is those who really need help are least likely to ask. So use it as a supplement, hybrid models, but if you can, if there's no substitute, if you can't meet in person because of its accessibility, please offer.
I like that a lot. You know, it reminds me, so when people ask me, do we go to a work from home model? Do we go back to where we were pre-COVID when we all went to the offices, or a hybrid? I say you can go back to the office, you can go hybrid, but don't go just be at home, because you need those interactions. And what you're saying is the same thing with a therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we have a hand. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Paul or
Yeah, that's fine.
Paul.
My name is Paul, sociologist, Copenhagen. Thank you for the talk and presentation. I have a question concerning what you said about personality traits, and sometimes we can't change them. And I guess there can be a lot of freedom in knowing what you can't change. But what kind of traits are typically traits that you cannot really modify that much? I mean, could you give some examples? Because I guess it's frustrating to try to change something maybe it's an illusion you can change. So better than resign and accept them.
Excellent question, and my answer will be inadequate at best. Look at the 5-factor models, which is Ocean, starting with openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and agreeableness. We now find there are different facets of openness, especially positive psychology has in a constructive way contributed to it. So let me take the extroversion. Parts of extroversions are also a positive effect. Now, if you look at, there was a study that I supervised in one of my students who looked at different strengths and their malleability, how much they can change. And we found, and it's a promising news, Paul, that is the lever of gratitude can go up and down, because when we do intentional practice, we can sort of increase our level of gratitude. So I can't really answer it from the 5-factor model, but I'm going to answer from the positive psychology traits or strengths. The second one is curiosity, because it's a very sort of a concrete actions that you can do by reading more, exploring more, doing some more actions, which I explain through different ways that I try to inculcate, because setting goals so that you can change that. We also find love. It's an interesting, because it's a very complex trait. But not from positive psychology, from emotionally focused therapy, EFT, has done some wonderful work, especially people who are not able to express themselves and they're struggling in relationships. And they have shown that you can change facets. I won't say you can change the complete trait of it. So it's the expression you can change. The lastly, but not least, where I find with things that you can't change, as a therapist, the narcissistic traits are hard to, the dial of moving them is hard. Yet we are also finding borderline traits. Those who are in therapy, borderline with intense emotionality, impulsivity. By age, as the age increases, especially among females after 40s, those traits go down. The impact on personalities go down. So there's a lifespan change. There's deliberate effort we can change. And last point, we also need to do more longitudinal studies to find out which traits are more malleable, especially in the positive realm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We have another hand, Wendy.
Hello. Thanks so much for this. It's just been wonderful listening. I've had the opportunity to meet one of you a long time ago, Dr. Rashid, and you know I'm big on strengths. My question is a little complex, so I'll start with what it is and then put a little background to it. I'm looking a lot lately into how we collaborate and cross-train between therapy and coaching. I chose the coaching route with a master's in psychology, primarily because I was living somewhere I couldn't do clinicals, but then fell in love with what you described earlier about the behavior change process. So I am so fascinated with studies, possibly if they are some or we need to do some, about kind of, I see clients benefiting from going back and forth. It might be not linear, but circular, working with the root causes and the mental illness treatment, or not even, you know, on the continuum of mental well-being, but then taking the coaching behavior change process, which, you know, you just said so beautifully, just of looking at application and, you know, how that's looking and the credibility and accessibility and the trust that our clients have in coaching and therapy. So I'm looking for cross-training and collaboration and wondering what you've seen about that.
It's a question of the hour, question of the times, because fortunately or unfortunately, I just don't know where to put my value judgment on this. Because of the jurisdictional restrictions, we can't offer therapy to people. So if I'm currently licensed in Ontario, Canada, I was trained in the United States. I did my doctoral, postdoc, everything in the United States. But because I'm licensed here, if my even client goes out of the province, I cannot. So I think we need to think creatively and incorporate more accessible ways of therapy. There was last year I gave an interview in Sri Lanka. I was doing some work, and the title of my interview is "We Need to Bring Therapy Out of Therapist Room." So if you read it, I think and positive psychology, positive psychotherapy gives you much more leverage because it's less stigmatizing and the skills are transferable, good scientific, emerging scientific base. So I think we need, if I was trained and I adhere to the traditional therapeutic route, I would not be able to do much work. So I really commend what Tal is doing through the Happiness Academy, is to bringing the therapy out of therapist room, but the therapeutic impact is now disseminated through coaching, through teaching. Therapy is a relatively recent Western intervention or invention. Ask Tal that Buddha was doing therapy through teaching. Our Greek masters, the teaching. So I think from teaching into now we have sort of found a nice medium of coaching. But the only thing is, here's my yes, I believe yes, there's a great potential. Here is my worry, and I will be really honest. We need to make sure that coaching practices understand the complexities. As I said, let's not overly complicate and let's not overly simplify. Life is in the gray. 98% of life is in the gray. And we seem to have, infected by Twitter and the small, with a microsecond attentional span, we want quick interventions, and we don't have tolerance for complexity. Healing will come by understanding complexity, whatever the framework. Teaching, coaching, therapy, bibliotherapy, art therapy, mindfulness, doesn't matter. It's the book, and Tal will tell you much better than I can do. Don't worry about the bowl. The soup is more important. The bowl can be round, can be square, can be in a platter. So worry about what the content, the recipe they're going to put in the.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tayyab. You know, it reminds me. So in 2017, you won the Outstanding Practitioner Award from the International Positive Psychology Association.
By mistake. By mistake.
It was a good mistake. And then this year, you delivered a keynote where you talked about, where you invited more practitioners and researchers to dialogue. And I think many people took that to heart. And it's exactly what you were talking about now. You know, we need to dialogue. You're a practitioner, you're an academic, we're on the same side. And both sides will do their work better if they become one side.
Yeah, and especially, Tal, given the escalation in mental health issues,
it's essential.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Pranvera, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Hello.
Hi.
I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Then I'm so sorry if my English is not so good, but I just was very curious. In my profession, I'm clinical psychologist, And I was very curious because in my work, sometimes I have to collaborate with a psychiater and some other specialist because the client or patient in the same time with the therapy, he needs the medication. And I'm curious in the PPT, the cases can be avoided only with this kind of therapy, or
So if I would, Tal, I'm going to translate the question if I got it correctly. So what's the role of medication in PPT?
yes, please. Thank you.
I worked for nearly a decade in a interdisciplinary team at University of Toronto's clinic, and we always worked with physicians, psychiatric nurses, psychologists, and counselors, and psychiatrists. Because believe it or not, there are times when the vegetative, so take a depression, for example, what we call vegetative symptoms, when the concentration and attention has just gone awry, just can't concentrate, sleeping too much or can't sleep, and absolutely no sense of pleasure. So these are symptoms, severe depression. We find good impact of medication because that prepares the clients to engage in therapy or engaging in coaching if they are in coaching and you're seeing that they are experiencing. So we need to understand the role of each intervention. So there is certainly role of medication in severe depression. You can't manage flagrant symptoms of bipolar disorder or psychosis without medication. There's good science. So I'm not going to say that, you know what, take PPT, take CBT, or take a dialectical behavior therapy, and you don't need to use medication. No. This is a different, again, let's use the analogy of soup. This is different recipe, different ingredients you need to put to create that healing experience. And you would, because we have been enamored by medication, commercially or otherwise, sometimes I would send my clients would insist that they need to see a psychiatrist. Because if you look at the outcome study of psychotherapy, about definitely 10 to 12% of effects of medication is just attributed to placebo. So in a double randomly controlled, double-blind studies, you don't know if you're getting real medication or just sugar pill. You still get better, which actually is a good news for us, because the power of self-efficacy that there is something I'm doing, the act of going to a psychiatrist, explaining my symptoms is going to bring me change, and it does changes, again, small percentage. So yes, there is definite role for medication, caveat. It tapers. We have, especially in depression, anxiety, yes, good efficacy. OCD, very good efficacy. Panic, yes, good, decent efficacy. After a while, the impact tapers. So if you look at the current evidence, the best therapeutic effects are when you start with, if it's a severe depression, start with medication, but bring them to behavior change. Some of the things that I talked about.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Tayyab. Do you mind if we go a bit over and we take one more question?
Absolutely. I'm all yours.
Thank you. So Whitney, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much for extending your time. I just have a question of curiosity. When you mentioned about getting out of the therapist's room and you were talking about nature and you were talking about art therapy, I'm wondering how you're actually using those in your practice. Are you getting out of your room?
I'll give you a very quick case example. I was working with a client, and I will tell you that I was very disappointed in myself that client is boring. There's nothing is working. I even told them, if therapy is not for everyone. The science tells that about 8 to 12%, Lambert's research tells, people actually in therapy get worse. So there are many factors for that. So I was about to give up on that client, and but they wanted to come for some reason, because they're just the act of coming and seeing me. But whenever I would see on my schedule their name, it was like, oh my God, what's going to be a very boring session. It turned out that I was lacking curiosity about my clients. As I said previously, that every one of you let's use for the sake of example, have strengths, 24 strengths. None of you are completely filled with all those 24 strengths. None of you are devoid of them. But I was blindsided about this client, that what are their strengths? So somehow we started discussing, and it came after many sessions that this client it's come from East Asian culture, had a terrible grudge, resentment about their uncle, because their mom told the uncle had choked them when they were very young, and that left some permanent medical damage. Listening to that narrative was so helpful. We were able to do some good work because I incorporated Chinese arts, how they would express this trauma. But I realize that sometimes I am, as a therapist, impatient. Each one of us have a story. Our story may not be the opera kind of version story, but we have stories. And if our clients we don't afford our clients the space and patience to unfold those stories in that therapeutic space, coaching, teaching, wherever, and therapy, I think the onus is on us. Onus is on our impatience. So that client taught me that I need to be humble, and I need to wait, let my client unfold their fullness. If they are not unfolding, there is a reason. So that's an example of curiosity. For a more academic answer, I love Todd Koston's work on curiosity. Absolutely wonderful. I took some of his work and incorporated in PPT.
Thank you, Tayyab.
Thank you.
Wow. So, some of the participants in this conversation in the chat were writing that what you're talking about is very similar to our SPIRE model. Because when we define happiness, we talk about the 5 elements: spiritual, which you talked about; physical, you talk about exercise; you talked about nutrition; intellectual, which when you talked about curiosity, that checked that box; relational, that's the R of SPIRE; and of course emotional, which you talk about a lot, the place for pleasurable and painful emotions. And there are many overlaps. And what I loved about what you had to say is that you bring these ideas and more from the world of academia. You worked with the founder of the field of positive psychology. You worked with Seligman. You're working. You've done a lot of research in different contexts, and you're bringing it to the therapeutic relationship and beyond. Because, as you say, not everyone will be able to afford or want to go to therapy, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn and apply these ideas from positive psychotherapy. Tayyab, you've been a model to me. You have taught me and so many others so much, including today. So I'm very grateful for your time, and thank you all for being here. So take care. Take good
Thank
care.
you, Tal. Thank you. Whatever you have done immense to the field, and thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Take care.
Tal is the master teacher of happiness.
I think he's so brilliant and wise and kind and humble. Everything that Tal teaches is based in science, that it's very interdisciplinary. And I love the fact that we draw on economics and science and psychology and literature and art and just everything as the holistic approach, and everything is interconnected.
You gave me this evidence-based, science-based tool, and I'm always grateful to you. Wherever you go, I'm going to follow you. That's it. You're not ever going to get rid of me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. California, Mexico, China, Greece, Paris, Singapore, Indonesia, Ireland, Toronto, Argentina. Wow, that's amazing. HSA is not a certificate program. HSA is a community.
I signed up for the material, and the teacher, obviously world renowned and wonderful. What I didn't realize is that I was going to get a community that is so wonderful. There are people from all parts of the world, and it just makes for such a rich conversation. And of course, events like this where we get to meet in person just really solidifies that the community is made up of like-minded individuals, professionals within their own fields that are leaders and want to take this material that we're learning and spread it with the rest of the world. And the friendships made are what makes us all happier in the end.
When you find a community of people who want to live purposeful lives, then it just amplifies the experience that we're all here to share together.